Welcome this evening to our Woolwich Township Council meeting on Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. Before we start, I will remind Council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I will also remind Council to speak clearly and project their voice when they are talking so people viewing at home can hear. I'll start with a roll call of Council for the benefit of the public watching this meeting. When I please wave at your camera, say here or present. I, Mayor Johnson, present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillor Merlin.
Present.
Councillor Redicott.
Present.
And Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you. Can I have a motion that Council reconvenes in open session, please? Moved by Councillor Redicott, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I'd like to start tonight by saying the land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited this land for at least 10,000 years. We acknowledge the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when the settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. This week, the first shipment of vaccines arrived in Canada. 2020 has been a year filled with anxiety for good reason. But for many people in our world, anxiety has been a way of life. We can name areas of the world over there where life is difficult, where poverty and hunger is a fact of life, where there is violence, but it's not just over there, it's here too. As politicians, we need to be able to look beyond our policies and procedures to see the people who live in those uncomfortable places and the history that led them there, often a history that began generations ago. So as 2020 comes to a close and we look forward to 2021, hopefully a little easier 2021, let's consider how we can work toward a system that supports and lifts up all of us. Let's start with a moment of silence. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? None. We have one item to come forward from closed session, that is appointments to the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee, GRAC. So I would entertain a motion that the Council of the Township of Woolwich consider and report 34/2020 respecting appointments to the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee, GRAC, and pending ratification by the partnering municipalities, appoints the following members to GRAC for a 4-year term ending December 31st, 2025. I'm not sure, Mr. Smith, did you have anything to report? Okay. The 4 appointees are Jolene McDonald, Trevor Tamlin, Teresa McClellan, and Brad Sales. Someone like to move? Councillor Martin, Councillor Shantz, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We have minutes from Council December 1st, 2020. Someone like to move them? Moved by Councillor Redicott, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have 2 delegations this evening. Before I begin, I'd like to remind all the delegates of some guidelines for participating in tonight's meeting. Please leave your video turned off and your microphone muted until you are called upon to speak. Please be advised that it is at the discretion of the chair to allow or not allow questions. Staff are available for questions this evening, but may not have the answer to your questions. You have 10 minutes to speak to council. We ask that you keep your comments brief and refrain from repeating information previously delivered by another delegate. After you speak, please wait for any questions from council. Once there are no further questions, please turn your microphone and camera off again. You may leave the meeting after your delegation is done if you wish. If you'd like to remain on the Zoom call and watch the remainder of the meeting, you may do so as long as you keep your camera and microphone turned off. Any disruptive behavior may result in your microphone being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Our first delegate is Kay Elgie of the Architectural Conservancy Ontario. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yeah, it's algae, like the pond scum, I always say.
It had to be one or the other, and I picked the wrong one. I'm sorry, Ms. Elgie.
It's okay. We're all algaes are very familiar to this exchange.
Go ahead.
Anyway, thank you very much, Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm here tonight representing Architectural Conservancy Ontario, which is a provincial charity, whose objective is to encourage the conservation of district structures and landscapes of architectural, historic, and cultural significance. Currently, I'm chair of the Provincial Board of Directors, but I know some of you because before that, I was the president of the local branch of North Waterloo Region. And ACO's members around the province include many heritage bridge enthusiasts, and I think some of you have heard from a few of them already this week. For myself, I learned a bit about the Winterbourne Bridge this summer when the local ACO branch president, Marg Rowell, former regional councillor Jean Hallboom, and I pitched the idea of getting federal funds to MP Tim Lewis. This was part of the shovel-ready heritage thing, but that whole initiative was to convince politicians to free up funds from the Investing in Canada infrastructure funds. But when I met with him, in preparing for that, I learned that the Winterbourne Bridge has been celebrated by artists like Peter Ettrell Snyder and by photographers like Carl Hebert. And I also know that it's something I was excited to discover all the wonderful shots of the Winterbourne Bridge on the Ontario Film Commission's website for Ontario film locations. And of course, your own website celebrates the treasure of this bridge. So it's really wonderful to see this appreciation. And I know you do appreciate it because I've watched your discussions. And I know there's certainly some reluctance I sense of people wanting to demolish it. So I want to put forward another argument tonight to throw into the mix. And that's to remind you of the township's legislated obligation to conserve significant heritage resources like the Winterbourne Bridge. As you know, the provincial policy statement is the highest planning level document for the province. It sets the rules and priorities which all levels of government must follow. And I want to draw your attention to section 2.6.1, which says significant built heritage resources shall be conserved. It's a very clear message. So then I think we need to ask, is the Winterbourne Bridge one of these significant heritage resources which must be conserved? Well, there have been a number of studies about this. One back in 2004 was done by Robinson Heritage Consulting, an inventory of Grand River watershed bridges. They used a rating criteria developed by David Cunning for the Heritage Branch of the Ontario Ministry of Citizenship and Culture in 1982. And any bridge that got a rating of 50 or higher was judged worthy of designation. And so you see that the Winterbourne Bridge in their study got a 54, which meant it was a significant heritage resource. There was another study in 2004 done by the region of Waterloo Heritage Cultural Heritage Planning Department, and they found they used the Ontario Heritage Bridge criteria, again something for the government has developed, and they found that the Winterbourne Bridge got a score of 52, and again anything over 50 meant it was a significant resource. then in 2013, the University of Waterloo Heritage Resources Center got funding from a variety of sources and produced an inventory of bridges in the Grand River watershed. Again, they determined the Winterbourne Bridge was significant, and this time they used a different formula, this evaluation checklist, which I'll come back to in a minute. But they did note that it was the only significant double span camelback Pratt through truss bridge in the region. Now, the chart the region used came from the Ontario Heritage Act, and it is the criteria that the Act lays out for how you determine cultural heritage value or interests. And so you can see here that there's three categories of it. The physical or the design value or the physical value is one. The historical or associative value is a second. And the third category is contextual value. And then within each of these three categories, there's three options. So you have a total of 9 criteria altogether. And the part I've underlined in that act is really important because a structure has to meet only one of the 9 criteria to be determined to be of cultural heritage value that needs to be conserved. So when we go back to that chart that the University of Waterloo Heritage Resources Center used, we see that the Winterbourne Bridge met reasons why it is worthy of designation and conservation. But those studies are all very interesting. I think the one that's most important for you and for our discussion is the one that was done as part of the environmental assessment. The one that was done by Architectural ASI, Archaeological and Cultural Heritage Services. And the reason I think this is most important is because, as you know, an environmental assessment are highly regulated. They need high expectations. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that you have to accept every word that's written in this heritage impact assessment. You're certainly welcome to get a second opinion. You probably would want to ask your municipal heritage committee to review and comment on this. So you can ask for a peer review, second opinion, make sure that the advice is unbiased. And lots of municipalities have a special fund for this, because when you're getting like a HIA for a development application, you want to make sure that the developer who's paying for it isn't calling the tune. You want to make sure you got good advice. But nevertheless, HIA deserves serious attention. And so the consultants here, ASI, determined that the bridge met 5 of the 9 criteria. So, and as they say, it certainly is considered to be a cultural heritage resource and should be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. So I take you back to the provincial policy statement, and I want to stress again this obligation that it says. It shall be conserved, not may be conserved if it's convenient, or might be conserved. And the good news is that if the bridge is designated, it does open a number of doors to you, including funding doors, which I know is of concern to you. One of these is the Waterloo Regional Heritage Foundation grants, because those grants, if you look on their website, you'll see that grants are given only to properties that are designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And you will also see on their website that they have given a number of grants to government-owned bodies, such as the Joseph Schneider House or Old Cambridge City Hall. So there are some possibilities there. And of course, the other benefits of designating and retaining the bridge are some of these things we talked about before, more heritage tourism, which I feel is going to be really promoted. I know Minister MacLeod has been very enthusiastic about this and has lobbied for special budget funds to encourage this to happen in the coming years, and more film shoots and so on. And also good for the environment. The fact that we don't have to tear it down, cart it away, and replace it. It's very good for the environment. So I know it's challenging, and you have really grappled with how are you going to repair this bridge. And I just wanted to point out a few of the resources that there are. There are resources available. There's an Association of Preservation Technology with a number of experts in that. Some of our members belong to that, and just one of them, Gene Hoblin's, just been at a conference on historic bridges for the past couple of days. So there are resources out there, and I think there are ways to do this. So I encourage you to designate it and to take advantage of some of the opportunities that will bring you. And that's the end of my presentation.
I think that was 10 minutes right on. Well done. Questions?
Oh, good.
From council? Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to the delegate. Thank you for coming and presenting and providing us some more information. I'm interested in the heritage designation, only in that with those designations, that's a lifetime designation, and would I guess it would kind of box Woolwich Township into forever maintaining the bridge. Is that correct? And my second part to that would be, are there funds and resources available to help provide with that maintenance?
Well, as a does it box you in forever? No, it doesn't. And again, with designating, there are certain things you can designate. I'm more familiar with houses than I am with bridges. I'll say that right up front. But there are certain aspects that you can designate that you will promise to retain, but you don't have to say you can't. I mean, that's not the point. We want them to be used, and we want them to be continually adapted and rehabilitated and so on. So it's not freezing it in time in perpetuity. That's definitely not the case. And as far as funding, I did mention the Regional Heritage Foundation is one body that I know will only give money to designated properties. But I know that through Architectural Conservancy, if there was to be something like a community fundraising thing, like, I mean, we've done this with a lot of properties, like the community decides it wants to keep a certain hall or something. So we do a fundraising, and we can arrange for those donations to be to receive charitable tax receipts, because we are a charity. So that helps also, that could also help.
Okay, thank you. If I could just have one more. As far as the services of the ACO, I was kind of going back and forth with one of your members the other day that was quite informed about historic bridges. And I'm just wondering, do you provide a service as, consulting on historical bridges as far as the maintenance schedules and costs and helping to write letters to upper tier governments to make the case for funding? Is that something that your organization would do?
We would do it informally. We do have a program called Preservation Works, but we do limit that mostly to community groups and so on. But that again is used, again, if there's a group of citizens that wants to save something and they want to get an assessment of that, we will provide very low cost assessments of that. Whether we have bridge experts within our membership, but I think the thing that we offer, the strongest thing we offer is exactly that, our network and the connections we can make. And I know one of our members, the one who went to this conference, is trying to contact people in the States as we speak, to try and to get some help from that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions, Councillor Shantz? Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to the delegate. You talked about the Heritage Foundation grant, and do you have any idea of what kind of dollars you're talking? Like, is it significant dollars or is it just small amounts?
You know, we did have a representative from our branch on that foundation back when I was local president, but that's now about 6 years ago. So I can recall some, I mean, they're not millions, so don't get your hopes up, but I can certainly recall $100,000 grants. They didn't have the amount listed on the website, so I couldn't do that, you know. I mean, they can be small too, you know, they can give like $12,000 grants to help with publications, but for the building ones, they don't have the same kind of limit that a lot of municipal grants, like the city of Kitchener, for example, they'll do 50-50, but it's capped at 5,000 or something like that. There's the last, my recollection was it certainly at that time there wasn't a limit on it, and I do know that the fund is well endowed because every year we taxpayers contribute to it. So it is there to make substantial difference. I don't think it would pay for the whole cost of the thing. I don't want to get your hopes up, but it's not to be just dismissed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redikoff. And then
In,
Councillor.
in your list of bridges along the in Waterloo region, I think you had one named the Mennonite Bridge. Is that the one near Winterbourne, or is that the one in St. Jacobs? Or are there other Mennonite bridges?
You know what? I'm not an expert on that study,
Okay.
but I know people that are.
Okay.
Yeah, because some of them were our members at the time, or I'm still in touch with some of the people who did that.
Okay, thank you.
Find out, but I don't know off the top.
Yeah, no problem.
I think there's one near Hawksville too.
Yeah.
Councillor McMillan. No, change your mind. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I see. So thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So now I exit, right? Stop my video and mute.
There we go. Thanks. Next delegate is Kim Hodgson, who is also speaking about the Peel Street Bridge. Ms. Hodgson.
Hello there. Had to hit the right buttons at the right time. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, Mayor Shantz, councillors, good evening. I know we've all been a little bridge preoccupied, and it's hard to get totally into that festive mood of holidays coming up. So looking forward to moving forward on this issue tonight. Alex, if I could have my slides up, that would be most helpful. Thanks. So I'm coming to you today. I read the recommendation that was presented, I guess it was posted online Thursday or Friday of last week, and had a look at the recommendation and to see how it had changed from the meeting a couple of weeks ago. So first off, I want to thank all of you for being so attentive to listening to residents and their concerns about the bridge, not only for getting across the river and connecting us to our recreation facilities out in the countryside, but also for our Old Order Mennonite population who really relies on that to get where they need to go. You don't often hear from the Winterbourne folks. I guess we're making up for it in spades the last couple of weeks. So thank you. And I do see evidence that you've listened when I look at the proposal and see some of Ryan Tucker's recommendations for community engagement. And I was really pleased to see that. So, you know, it was with huge mixed feelings. I read the report and I'm thinking, okay, this is great. And I'm grateful that, you know, they want to provide a bridge in our community. And truly I am. And then I got to thinking, you know, are we really sure that this bridge can't be fixed and rehabilitated? So I guess I have trust issues, my brother says, a little lightheartedness to introduce to it. But I've just been thinking about it and reading about it and thinking, before we determine that it needs to come down and another bridge put in its place, and I do acknowledge that Ryan had put out some alternatives that might, you know, be like the sympathetic planning that's talked about. But still, before we get there and make a decision, you make a decision tonight about whether it comes down, and that's the rule. I wanted to revisit a couple of things. So here we are, a nice picture of our our bridge on a sunny morning. Next slide, please, Alex. Thanks. So now what? So as Kay was saying, this is a decision fraught with significant financial considerations. For me, it's about the legacy of these beautiful bridges and what it means to the countryside from not only a township point of view, but from a regional point of view, because the more I researched, the more I saw how many really cool bridges there were. Reading about the closing of the Middlebrook Bridge made me pretty sad, to be honest. It's such a beautiful area. I think, now what? You know, we don't want to lose these things. Once they're gone, that's it. I'm gonna go back in time here, if you will. My husband and I grew up in Kitchener-Waterloo. And if you want to hear a rant, get him talking about the Kitchener City Hall and how that was taken down. So I remember that as a kid, especially this time of year. I don't know if others do. It was beautifully decorated and we go by it. And elected officials at the time determined, I'm sure I wasn't interested as a 10-year-old, that it needed to come down. And then we went by the other building that was put in its place and we thought, why was that done? So I do not want to be in a situation where we're doing something similar. So that's kind of my frame of reference. I can have you forward those, please. Thank you. So the decision before you tonight, put forward by the engineering staff, reflects, I think, to some extent what we heard. And I think maybe residents are just wondering what we want to. We want a bridge, but we want a new bridge. And I'm wondering if we're skipping a step there. So before you tonight is the hard, cold facts that you need to be voting on to remove the Heritage Bridge and replace it with a structure to be determined. And again, with full acknowledgement that Ryan has put out some alternatives that would be, you know, kind of adaptive use down the road. But I don't think we should skip ahead. Next, please. So I think tonight isn't the time to decide that bridge comes down. I think that you should not support the recommendation to remove. I think it's premature. So if you look at the environmental assessment, and again, I'm not a planner. There's differences between infrastructure planning and new planning. Talk to a planner. I'm not one. But when I looked at the environmental assessment the first time, rehabilitation is the preferred alternative. So it was kind of that funny recommendation. It was to remove/rehabilitate. And then after you listen carefully to us, you realize that, yeah, we need a bridge here. So we kind of moved on because we had the assumption that the bridge was going to be too costly to fix. It wouldn't be worthwhile, varying opinions about that. And then when I was able to read the Heritage Impact Assessment, which was done back in 2017, I thought, okay, better minds and works. We've got experts here saying that this is a bridge worthy of conservation. So that, taken with the fact that we know that, as Kay has mentioned, it's on websites everywhere. It's listed on heritage resources here in the States. I've been back and forth with Nathan Holt from heritagebridges.com. He's, I believe he's conveyed his support for rehabilitation too. I don't know all what's involved, but what I do know is that I'm going to feel really bad if we don't try to find out all the ways that this possibly could be rehabilitated and to look for funding and have time to look for funding and crowdsource and get the community behind us before we tear it down. We can't do that when it's slated to be demolished. So essentially, if we go with removal, that seems, in my, likely somewhat uninformed opinion, that it goes against the Heritage Impact Assessment. That doesn't make sense. So, if we look at feedback from Waterloo Region's Heritage Planning and Advisory Committee, they've raised their concerns and they pointed out some really good suggestions that council can review, and indeed our Heritage Committee can say, okay, what about this first? So before we take it down, what possibly can we do? And if I can have the next slide, please, Alex. So I just think it's premature. A decision to take it away tonight would be premature. So as I said, it ignores recommendations of the Heritage Assessment. It ignores the heritage feedback provided by Waterloo Region. I don't believe that our Heritage Committee has had a chance to see it and to comment on that and to provide you with their input. And perhaps, I want to say this callously, but more importantly, it doesn't allow residents of this area who have a keen interest in having something preserved there to put their best minds together and to come forward with some ideas of how we can do this. So, I have written grant proposals for 20 years. I'm happy to pitch in There is such skill, expertise, and eagerness in this community to see if it can work. We're not unreasonable people. If it's going to cost so much that it makes no sense, no one is going to push for it. But I don't think it should be demolished before we try. I've reached out to Tim Lewis's office, Mike Harris's office. People are putting the bugs on people's ear. We need time to put some proposals together. And I would respectfully ask that you give us that time. The other thing I want to say is that Heritage, especially for a small township with such a small number of staff who I'm sure are overworked and, we're growing rapidly. There's so many challenges. And then you add COVID to the mix. It's not escaping me that to be advocating for a bridge at this point during a pandemic seems a little rich. But if I don't speak up now, we don't get this chance again. So with all due respect to the other hardship that's going on, I feel that I know that this is pretty insignificant in its place, but I still feel the need to advocate. So, we talk about barn builders in the region and how this community is known to come together and solve problems and to put their skills and expertise, money and resources together to make things happen. Why can't we do this here? Let's be bridge builders. For the risk of sounding trite, we could well be missing opportunities to collaborate with the region, with other provincial groups. We haven't had a chance to do that. And I would ask you to give us that chance. I know I can rally some good people within the community. If you would like us to collaborate with you, we will try to take the load off staff to do that. I would say, give us a period of time that you're comfortable with to try to make this work. And if at the end of it, if we can't get funding, if there's no interest and council decides that it comes down, then it comes down, and give us whatever bridge you see fit, but not before we have a chance to say that. Next slide, please. So I didn't really realize I was so passionate about bridges. Who would have thought? Anyhow, Kay has adequately covered this. If we can move on, please. Yeah, so just to reiterate what Kay has said, I don't want to have it just a window dressing, but I think that this bridge, considering how many recommendations have been given that it be designated. And I think that that's scary because we don't know what that means. And so, when I was researching for this talk, Waterloo Region has apparently some really great, seminars and webinars that we can go on and learn. So I'm fumbling my way through this as well. The only thing I know is that I don't want this bridge to come down before we have a chance to explore every single option to make it useful for the members of this community. I don't think that's too much to ask. I'm asking for time. Next slide, please.
Kim, speaking of time.
I'm out. Okay.
Are you almost finished? Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I am. So last thing I'll say is that in the assessment that was provided, there are a number of alternatives and mitigation strategies. Removal is right at the end. Let's not go to the end. Let's go to the first, see how we do, and then move on in succession. Anything else? Thanks, Alex. There. So let's be mindful of our legacy. Not a great view. Let's follow the established heritage conservation processes, both within the township and the region and provincial guidelines. And let's collaborate with partners and supporters for some long-term solutions. We can do this. And there's no reason it needs to come down. Give us some time. We'll figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. A passionate plea. If I can start the questions, how much time do you think you would need?
That's a great question. I wish I had the chance to speak with Tim Lewis. We've been playing FOML tag, and maybe Kay can jump in on this. I don't know. I didn't get into the funding cycles. It seems like there's some provincial dollars available. They need to be significant. This can't be just the township. That's the more I come to think about it. I think it has to be wider than the township, with all due respect, because budgets are tight. We have a few staff. I think if we collaborate and pick the minds of people, we'll find out what a realistic timeline is. Considering that a few of us have taken a deep dive on this in the last, month, and then we've been interested in it for years. I don't know. I think that, it's closed right now. I think that if we can look at some resources to see if we get an assessment so that the engineering folk think that's safe, that nothing's going to happen, that we go from there. I don't know. I think it would be foolhardy for me to put a time out there, but you know what? I'd be happy to give a progress update in 9 months about, actually, I would do it sooner. I'd give you a progress update in 3 months about potential funding sources and whether we have a chance of accessing them. I think we can do that. We've got enough interested people and there's enough brain power across the province on this that I think that that's reasonable. And then depending on what the scope of funds might be available, then you can determine if that's a good next steps to look at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shantz, did I see your hand? Yes, no, no? Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Martin? Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Kim, I would just like to correct you on one thing that you said a couple times. You've talked about demolishing the bridge. That has never been part of our project. I've always talked about incorporating some of the old bridge into the new and preserving some of the heritage value.
Your point's well taken. My apologies, Councillor Martin. You absolutely did say that, and I thank you for your leadership on that. You did. Thank you.
Councillor McMillan and then Reddicock.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. You talked about playing phone tag with our MP, Tim Lewis. I was just wondering, I'm happy to hear that you're reaching out to the levels of government that have the pocketbooks that can deal with this type of issue. Certainly they're in a different financial position than we are. Our mayor also crafted a well-articulated letter to both our MP and our MPP advocating on behalf of the residents of Winterbourne to save this bridge, fighting for our residents. So I'm happy to hear you're reaching out. Have you heard anything? You said you're playing phone tag with Tim Lewis. Have you heard anything from Mike Harris Jr.'s office?
No, I've reached out to him by email twice and by phone once, but have not heard a response at this point. So they were just, so he's been pretty busy. So I intend to follow up this week.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Reddicock. And then
one of your statements really highlights the decision that council is struggling with when you said how much money makes no sense in rehabilitating the bridge. And so that maybe would be, I think Ryan has done some work on what rehabilitation would look like, but in your gathering together local resources, that might be part of your project as well, to see how much money makes no sense in rehabilitation the bridge. And I want to thank you again for your passion and for your willingness to work on this for the residents of Winterbourne.
Well, thank you. It's been actually a pleasure. We all enjoy it. Yeah, I think, having, it's like anybody renovating a house. I'm sure many of you have done that. You need to know what kind of money you're looking at to see if you really want to go down that road or not. So I think it's fair to say, it would help us to decide if we know that there's, 3 million versus 30,000. Of course, that's going to make a decision. The township, I agree, it can't do it on its own, nor should it do its own. This is a regional treasure. I think that it's fair to say that we take a lead, but I think we bring others in.
Thank you.
Councillor Shantz. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you to Kim. I guess I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Mayor Shantz asked and what kind of timeline we're talking about. This has been going on for a number of years already, and I think we kind of knew the outcome a long time ago, what the staff was recommending, and now all of a sudden the community has rallied and thinks they can move ahead with something. And I guess I've heard that before from different communities, and it fizzles out. And I guess I'm wanting to know what do you think is reasonable for a timeline, and to make sure that that doesn't happen here.
Well, that's a good question. I don't think I can look in a crystal ball and speak for the rest of the community and know that they're gonna, I sense commitment. I mean, I don't speak for, I'm just very cautious when I speak for anybody other than myself. I think that if you gave me a couple of months to look at potential pots of money, again, when I look in my community, I see professors of engineering, there's architects, there's all sorts of people who can weigh in on this to say, yeah, this is feasible, or no, it's not. I think in 3 months, we would have a good idea whether it was realistic. So I'm asking for a 3-month reprieve to bring people together. I'll be picking, if you decide you want to go this route, I'll pick Kay's head as well in terms of some people to have a look at it, to look at what money's available, and to assess realistically what we would need. And as I said before, I don't want to be unreasonable. I'm not saying we need to preserve at all costs, but we owe it to the community to have a look and see what's there. If it's not feasible, no one's going to say, oh, here's $100,000, fix the bridge. That's ridiculous. No one's going to waste their time on that. And I wouldn't waste your time on that. If funds aren't available, if there's no will at a provincial level or, a lot more, more broadly than this community, then we'd have to rethink it. But I would suggest that 3 months is a fair reprieve, if you will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just with regards to giving time and having the community rally support, do you think you can be self-sufficient with that? And the reason why I ask is because there's been a plethora of communications that we've been included on between the residents of Winterbourne and our staff. And I think that's great. I think when a community gets engaged, really good things happen and staff can make good decisions when they're really well informed from the community. But we as a council have not funded staffing levels to maintain that level of coordination, probably beyond tonight's meeting, if we're honest. So if we were to allow the community time to see what they could rally, do you think that could be self-sufficient? Because our staff would not be able, I think it would be unreasonable for council to expect our staff to play a participatory role in that effort.
Fair enough. As I said, fair enough to Councillor McMillan. You make a good point. This is an add-on. Staff are already busy. I have, there's many capable people in the community. It doesn't have to be me, but that said, I have many years of experiencing facilitating planning tables across the province. I think that I could take a lead role if that was acceptable, but we'll have to be really clear in order for this to be successful. Is really clear scope and how communication gets back to the staff person and council. With that decided, agreed upon, then this should work.
Hey.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Merlin and then Councillor Martin last word.
Yeah, I don't really have a question for Ms. Hodgson. So if Councillor Martin wants to go ahead, I would only say about this part of the discussion, I'm not comfortable with putting the onus on the residents to save this bridge. This is a township property. It's an asset of the residents, and I think if council decides that we rehab or preserve, I think then that is the direction we would give staff through the EA process. I'm not comfortable asking Ms. Hodgson or any of the residents to have to take the lead on finding money to fix infrastructure that is public infrastructure. That doesn't sit right with me. So that's my only comment there, but I do have many more comments after when we just get on to general discussion, and I have some questions. So that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. We do have a precedent for asking the community to raise funds, though. A number of them. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Patrick just said. I'm not in favor of giving any timeline. This has been going on for 3 years. If we get to this place now and the community would have come along and say, hey, we raised so many dollars, then I might say, hey, we need to look at it. They've had 3 years come up with nothing. I don't expect them to come up with anything worthwhile in another 3 months. It was also stated that Kim is speaking for the residents of Winterbourne. I would suggest she's speaking for herself and one or two other people, because I haven't heard from anybody that was against the way we're going, looking at a new bridge. In fact, they all applauded that. And if you want to talk about the residents, you have to include the Mennonite people in the area, and that will certainly tell you how they feel.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. we're just looking for questions for Kim right now, and we'll have our debate later when. Are there questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hodgson, and thank you for your passion and your leadership. And we'll go through the staff report with staff and see where we come out the other side.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Thanks, councillors, for listening.
Okay, I'll call on Mr. Tucker. I think that's where we're at to review the report, please. Ryan?
Hi, good evening, Mayor Shantz and members of council. I do have a presentation, so if Alex can throw that up on the screen, that'd be great. Thank you, Alex. Great. Okay, staff are in front of you again this evening to present on the Peel Street Bridge Environmental Assessment Project. I would like to begin with some quick remarks on the heritage value and significance of the Peel Street Bridge, which the delegations brought to your attention again this evening. Staff understand the built heritage value of this structure and did gear the original recommendation in a fashion to limit the financial burden on the township, but to keep the door open to rehabilitate the bridge should funding be secured. With that in mind, at the last council meeting on December 1st, the discussions around the bridge appeared to be leaning towards a replacement of the structure. Staff have revised the original recommendation being presented to council to a replacement. Ultimately, staff see three viable options for council to consider this evening. One, consider a new structure to replace the existing bridge. This option allows for consideration of the heritage value through plaquing or sympathetic enhancements to the new structure. Consideration would also be given to constructing a replica of the existing bridge, though this would probably be one of the more expensive options explored. The second option would be to keep the bridge closed and explore all avenues for funding to rehabilitate the bridge or potentially keep it in place as a monument, which Ms. Hodgson did reference. And then the third would be to rehabilitate the bridge for pedestrian use. This option would keep the bridge in place and allow the community to use it as they are today, but no vehicles would be allowed on the bridge. This option also has the potential to be eligible for heritage funding. Should council direct staff on an alternative that replaces or rehabilitates the existing structure, staff would recommend that all costs associated with the replacement or rehabilitation be debentured, as they are not currently part of the proposed 2021 capital budget. Lastly, through the EA process, it has been brought to the attention of staff and council that the bridge is still being used today. The bridge was evaluated in 2017 by a professional engineer and deemed unsafe and subsequently closed. It is not currently safe for any use. The last recommendation in front of council tonight is to stop up and close the right of way for the bridge and erect barriers to stop access. Unfortunately, this must be done to keep the general public safe.
Ryan, could you just,
Yeah.
are we supposed to be advancing slides here?
Nope, sorry. We'll be advancing slides right now. So Alex, need the next slide, please.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. So phase three. So I just want to lead council through what phase 3 of an environmental assessment would look like should council decide to replace the bridge. So phase 3 of an EA can be broken down into 5 basic parts. Number 1 would be identify potential alternative designs for the new structure. 2 would be to determine the impacts that each design would have and if those impacts can be mitigated. The third step would be based on the review of the alternative designs, staff would determine an initial preferred design. And the fourth step would be for staff to present all the designs that were reviewed to the public, including that initial preferred design. And then based on the fifth step would be based on feedback received from the public and agencies. Staff would review the initial preferred design and then make a recommendation to council on the actual preferred design. So next step, please. Sorry, slide. Prior to determining what alternative designs to review, staff would issue a focused questionnaire to the community to determine potential uses and what ideas the community has to commemorate the historic structure. Staff would review the feedback received from the questionnaires and create the alternative designs to be reviewed. Next slide, please. Additional field work would be required to aid in identifying potential impacts to each design, which includes an archaeological stage 2 study, preliminary geotechnical investigation, as well as topographic and legal surveys. Any previously completed study would also be reviewed to determine if they need to be updated to aid in determining the impacts. Next slide, please. So each design would be reviewed against the typical environmental assessment criteria of social, cultural, natural environment, technical, and economic environments. Each design alternative would be added to the project decision matrix so that staff could compare each alternative effectively. Next slide, please. Staff would propose a virtual public consultation center to inform the general public about the different designs and to seek feedback. Staff would also provide hard copies of the public consultation center material to anyone not able to review online, specifically the Mennonite community or anyone who doesn't have a computer. Based on the feedback received, staff would review the initial preferred design, was still the preferred design, and then make a recommendation to council. Next slide, please. So ultimately, staff are looking for direction from council this evening on how to proceed with the project, which will guide staff on the next steps for the project. And with that, I will take any questions from council.
Questions for Mr. Tucker? Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Ryan. There seems to be some question as to whether the engineers that we're using are capable of determining whether this bridge is salvageable or not. And there seems to be professionals out there that work on these older structures. What's your comment on something like that?
To you, Mayor Shantz, to you, Councillor Shantz. I'm not sure where the confusion's coming from. Staff have always said this bridge can be rehabilitated for pedestrian or vehicular use. There's just an associated cost with each of those. So the structure's not gone to the point where it's falling into the river. There is still the option to rehabilitate the structure.
If I could have a follow-up. So they're talking about wanting an extension on making a final decision on how we move forward. When we move into phase 3, how long does that part of the study go before we actually get involved in deciding what type of structure we're going to put in and that type of thing?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to you, Councillor Shantz. I believe in the report there is a time frame for how the EA would proceed. And I believe that we would be looking to take a recommendation to council in August of next year. So we'd probably be about 8 or 9 months to go through the full process and get back to council on a recommendation. So there's some time.
Go ahead, Larry.
So would that delay anything if we would grant 3 months sabbatical on this for them to do some homework, the community to do some homework and send back a report, or will that work against what you're trying to do?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to you, Councillor Shantz. Obviously, if we were to delay by a few months, as Councillor Martin said, this project has been going on since 2017, or 3 years almost now. So delaying it is unfortunate, but the other issue that I would find would be trying to budget the actual construction work on this project. So if we did proceed and there was a delay, we would not be able to finalize the project in time to be prepared for the 2022 budget, would be my concern.
I guess I have more of a direct question. Can we work the two in tandem for 3 months and not delay what you're doing, but have that being part of the final decision, or will that not work?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to you, Councillor Shantz. The difficult part with that is that the project to proceed, it requires a budget allocation. So if that was council's will to proceed with both in tandem, there would be a cost associated with that. And that's in the proposal in the council report.
So just can you clarify what that extra cost would be? Because here it looks like phase 3 from February to June. You are looking for public comments, preparing alternative design concepts, and identifying a recommended design. And I believe Ms. Hodgson would be more looking to find funding for whatever we're doing. I guess to the extent that it might affect what kind of funding she's looking for. So can you sort of clarify where that tension lies?
So, Mayor Shantz, I think it would be like two ships going in opposite directions, right? If council wants to, so if the recommendation was approved tonight to replace the structure, our consultant would be moving forward under that pretense. So we'd be looking at alternate designs and finding different designs for a new bridge. In the background, Kim would be trying to secure funding to rehabilitate the structure through that heritage stream. So it would be kind of counter to what council was recommending.
Thank you. Other questions, Councilor Ryan? Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz. I have a question for, I'm not sure if it's Ryan or if Mr. Patrick would be better to comment on this, but in the report, you're asking for funding in the next budget for 2021 with this recommendation. And there is also mention of debentures, not just this project, but other projects in 2021 that they weren't listed in here. I'm wondering if you could provide council a preview of what the next 2021 and maybe up until 2025 as far as what staff have planned for debentures. Since being on council, debentures have been kind of a bad word, and I'm just wondering where we're at. I understand things have changed, and I just want to see what the mystery debentures are going to be that was alluded to in the report. So maybe Mr. Petherick would be better answering that.
Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So I won't address what was specifically in the report. I think Ryan still would need to do that. But from a budgeting perspective, if we recall, this year we had $727,000 in the budget that we or council approved to actually have internally financed, and it was for a road project. Now, through the whole COVID pandemic, we had to delay some of our capital projects, and that was one of the projects that was delayed. So from a staff perspective, we're going to be forwarding that project forward into 2021. So we'll be still looking to do $727,000 as internal financing debt, not external. And anything beyond that, I don't believe there's anything really from an external debt that right now. I know there's some requests for upper levels of funding for projects to proceed. So I think that's maybe where if you don't get that upper levels of funding, maybe it would have to be debenture. Then I think that would be a future discussion, but nothing really specific is jumping. I don't have the capital budget in front of me, and nothing else is really specifically jumping up at me. But I mean, Ryan may have some further discussions because it was in his report.
Okay, yeah, I was just, I know we've been talking about a couple of big projects coming up, Barn Swallow Drive, I don't know what else. There's quite a few other ones, some in Breslau. So that's why I was wondering how this decision would impact future years. I do have other comments, but I don't have any other questions. So if I can just send it back to you, but I do have more things to say, if that's okay with you, Mayor Shantz.
Sure. Before we do that, Mr. Patrick has something else to say. Hey, you put your camera on. Did you want to sign in too?
So just if I can, Madam Mayor. So I think in the context of the projects, for when we're talking about Barnstable and we're talking about some of the projects that are happening down in Breslau, so they're really big growth projects. And I think from a staff perspective, what we were thinking about was whether we'd have the availability of development charges to be able to pay for those projects right off the bat. And so we may have to do some debenturing to get that work accomplished, but the repayment of that debenturing will not be falling directly on the tax base. That would still be collected through development charges. But once again, I think it all depends on how development occurs. and whether we would need to externally debenture for projects, depending on when they come into the queue and what year they do, and depending on how our building activity occurs. Because right now, we have seen significant influx of development charges into our reserve funds. So it's kind of helped them. Some of the projects are going to be coming forward in future years, but there is a timing issue of when we actually are going to receive development charges and when the projects occur, and there may have to be some debenturing to short-term gap us into that. So that's probably what I would add for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cooker, did you want to chime in?
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Just to for some clarity, if we look at the approved budget from 2020. Sorry, can you hear me? Fine. Is that okay?
You're a little quiet, but.
Sorry, I will speak louder. I'm used to speaking louder, not quieter, I guess.
Brennan put himself in here.
So I just wanted to let council know that in the 2020 budget that was approved this year and the 4-year forecast taking us to 2024, you would see that we have required upper government funding in 2 specific areas, in our roads and in our bridge program, because those programs are only funded through levy dollars or federal gas tax, none of which we have enough to really continue to sustain our networks. However, we are able to generally manage the year we're going into, and that is no different as council will find out going into 2021. And Mr. Petherick had already explained that we are just carrying forward the debenture that was already approved from council. So you would see that same thing happen, and the future forecasted years we can't fund for roads and bridges, and they are shown as upper government funding because that's really it's really a budget deliberation process to actually debenture. That would be council's decision, not staff's. At least that's how it's been viewed.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Tucker, did you have anything to add on that budgeting piece? I think at the beginning you're going to chime in a bit.
No, I think in the report, the debenture that is mentioned would be directly related to the Peel Street Bridge. So anything moving forward for rehabilitation or replacement, staff would recommend that would be debentured.
Any other questions? Okay, there is a recommendation from staff. Councillor Marlihan. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I did have some comments. I hope you can bear with me through this. As Ms. Hodgson was stating, she didn't know how passionate she could get about a bridge. I kind of have been feeling that way the last couple of weeks myself, and I went and visited the bridge before we first had a public meeting about this, and being on the bridge, which township staff are not going to like because I'm not actually supposed to be on the bridge and modeling bad behavior. But I did walk across the bridge, and being on it and the view and the actual, the physical structure is actually quite an interesting bridge. Does need some help. And I don't know, for some reason, the last since this started, our council meetings have been weird about it, and the delegations and some of the comments from council they haven't sat right with me, and I've been mulling this over in my head, and I actually haven't done this in years, is actually prepare a statement, because I kind of want, I have a lot of different things that I want to, and you're not all going to like them, but I feel like there needs to be a last stand here for this bridge. So I do want to address the bridge and some of the discussion we've had here. So I am going to be reading this, and I apologize in advance. First of all, I just want to say that I do respect all the members of council, that we don't agree on all issues, and we do come from things from different perspectives. And I believe that contributes to better decisions. I'm also fine with accepting criticism when it's warranted on things that I say and do at council. And I strongly believe that we all have a right to our opinions, and that's a value that has occupied my entire professional career. And I extend that out in the world and for politicians as well and at meetings. So the last meeting, like I mentioned, it was kind of a weird vibe that I got and kind of unsettling between gruff declarations that the bridge be replaced because the Mennonites pay taxes, and speechifying about investing in our communities and opining that council is just cheap. I didn't understand where that was coming from, other than to, set us up for something to make our decision go a different way. In the case of Councillor Martin declaring that the Peel Street Bridge was junk and should be fully replaced with a new structure, that he would like some part of the old bridge part of it, and his justification that Mennonites pay taxes and deserve it. I don't really think that's true. And I don't think if you ask Mennonites that they would think that was true either. I've lived in Woolwich Township my entire life. I know Mennonites. And, I don't think if you went to them and said, do you deserve a $5 to $6 million bridge because you pay taxes? I really don't feel that they would feel that way. That's just not my experience. And the Mennonite constituents that I've been dealing with, I don't believe that's how they think. In the case of the Peel Street Bridge, in this case, staff, it struggled with the Mennonite community with the farmers, repeatedly overloading the bridge with overloaded wagons and farm equipment, which eventually led to the demise of the bridge. They see the bridge as a utility and not as a piece of history. I'm also surprised to see Councillor Martin leading the charge to demolish and build the new bridge, especially with its cost. Judging by the extreme low use of buggy traffic, this would be quite a subsidy benefiting very few people. On the flip side, investing in green infrastructure or planting trees is met with skepticism, and as he repeatedly announces his doubts about climate change. He's railed against subsidizing youth sports and recently stated that he doesn't believe that government should subsidize childcare. But here we are with
point of order, Madam Mayor.
Councillor, you keep it to the topic. You're just railing on Councillor Martin. This is
I've got more. This is important. This came out of Councillor Martin's discussion about the Peel Street Bridge, as Councillor McMillan also stated things in defense of. I'm on topic, so I would appreciate if you'd enlighten me and let me finish what I have to say. And again, you don't have to agree. I'm not asking you to agree, but I am asking for the opportunity to make an argument here.
You can make an argument.
I called a point of order.
Okay, go ahead.
It's just certainly I did make comments there. I think Councillor Martin made comments. I addressed council. I did not address specific councillors, and I think when we're going after specific councillors, like is happening right here, I think we're breaking the rules of decorum that we've all agreed to. So that's my point of order.
Yeah, you're quite welcome to make your point on the argument, but not.
Okay, I will continue on and I will not name names. There are some members of council that believe that council is cheap, and those members are entitled to that opinion. The evidence that we nickel and dime budgets and whether or not we should have a concession stand. Those were direct hits at Pat Merlihan. Anybody who is in Woolwich Township would recognize that was a slight at the work I've done on budgets in the past year. And I'm okay if anybody thinks I'm cheap. I'm fine with that. But if you're asking if we're frugal or are we cheap, it feels like we don't know what our jobs are as elected officials. There's vastly different philosophies about the roles we play, but ultimately, we are here to mind the public purse strings and ensure that the spending of government work is justified. And we do that by asking questions and challenging assumptions. And there's a bunch of other stuff here that I will just pass over. And when we talk about investing in the community, it's admirable and something that I agree with. Limited resources force us to consider the best value for the people being served. Spending $4 to $6 million, in my opinion, is not a smart investment. But if you want to spend $4 to $6 million, then please come prepared at budget time to find the services that you want to cut or the budget items that you want to cut to make this work. That's the kind of work that needs to happen. The only value that Peel Street Bridge has is its heritage. It is not valued as a crossing for vehicles or buggies, because if it were, the people using it would have abided by the load limits and could still be using it. The Glasgow Street Bridge, the Middlebrook Bridge, the Westmount Rose Covered Bridge are all recent examples of the no respect given to the load limits and that Township have placed on these. A couple of years ago, not that long ago, a dump truck drove over the covered bridge and cracked the deck and put it out of commission for quite a while. And I don't even know how much it cost, but it was a lot. The traffic on Peel Street, the counts are 100 cars and about 10 buggies a day. And if you do coming and going, you can cut that number in half for how much use this is getting as a vehicle type bridge. So Ryan Tucker sent me the OSIM report on the weekend. I read that over. This very expensive report that we pay for highlighted over $10 million in bridge maintenance and the subsequent schedules to maintain the incredible amount of bridges and culverts throughout the township. At $1.5 million in the budget or 1.7, we aren't meeting those targets. The Peel Street Bridge is not a priority crossing. It was used simply as a shortcut to get to Northfield Drive. The evidence so far doesn't support demolishing and replacing the structure. I was confused by the initial ask of the Winterbourne residents from their first meeting. Between their long list of grievances and one of the councillors' demand for a bridge replacement, I was under the impression that any crossing would be acceptable. But I'm now hearing more so from residents that is the actual heritage of the bridge that people want to preserve. And those emails have been still coming in just before this meeting started. I believe that rehabilitating the bridge for pedestrian use would serve the residents and the visitors to Winterbourne best. It is the most economical option. It could be rehabbed and used by 2022 as opposed to a new bridge where the best case scenario would be 2024 or 25. Most importantly, a rehab would keep the Iron Lady still standing for the next 3 decades or more with ongoing maintenance. These historic bridges are unique to our area, and they're even embodied in our township logo and our township motto, proudly preserving our past, confidently embracing our future. Since my time on council, debenture financing for infrastructure projects like road resurfacing and maintenance work have always been frowned upon. Mark Baumann was particularly ornery about the thought of saddling his grandkids with paying the debt for maintenance items. And I agreed with him, as did council over many years. Staff and I believe staff in this instance have respected that direction from council and with their recommendation to close the bridge. I think that embodied the spirit of what council had given staff. And I suspect that philosophy may change with different priorities, and that would be something we can talk about during the budget time. The report before us tonight alludes to more debenture financing of infrastructure projects. I asked about that. And when we talk about it in the 2020 budget, which would be January, we don't really know where that's going. And I don't think it's really responsible for committing $1.5 to $6 million to this bridge tonight without having the facts of what the budget is and what we're looking at for the coming years, and the implications of what this decision would make on other priority infrastructure projects. So I won't be supporting demolishing this bridge. At this time, I would like to offer a motion to defer and authorize the staff to stop up the bridge, the access to the bridge for liability concerns, and defer this decision until after the budget process in February. I believe I'll be able to make a more informed decision, and I believe council will have more details at that time. That's kind of my written comments. And again, I think Councillor Martin maybe misunderstood when I talked about not feeling right about asking the community to have to fundraise. I mean, it would be great if they did do that, but to lead that charge, I don't think is right in this situation when it's clearly this is a maintenance issue. We're not talking rec centers and things like that. This is right now it's a piece of township property that is either maintained or at this point maybe demolished. So my motion is to defer and give staff the authorization to close up that bridge. Thanks for your time.
So there is a motion on the floor. Is there a seconder? Councillor McMillan, you're seconding it?
Yes, please. And can I just take the opportunity to apologize for my use of the concession stands as an example? That was a situation where I was trying to come up with an example off the top of my head and I got out over my skis. Councillor Millihan's right. That was inappropriate. So I do apologize for using that example.
Accepted. Thank you.
So I'm just looking at my calendar for January. I think if I'm reading this correctly without opening everything up, we have budget for 5th, 7th, 12th, and 14th. Yes?
Yes.
And then the 19th is the committee
Yes.
meeting.
And 26 is council.
And the 26th is council. So on a deferral, we usually give a date. So Councillor Merlihan, you suggested in February. We should be finished. We're hoping to be finished budget the 14th of January. So would you like to suggest a date on that, Councillor Merlihan?
I'm good with any date in February, a couple weeks after budget before it gets too heavy.
February 9th is a committee meeting. How does that sound?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Are there questions? Councillor we can discuss the deferral, can't we?
Yes, you can.
Councillor Redekop, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Merlihan, did you say as part of the motion that you want staff to close the bridge?
Part of the recommendation that staff were concerned about is having public access right now because they feel that the bridge is not safe. So I don't want to jam up that ask of the staff because they're concerned about the liability. And I guess either Jared or Ryan would better to speak to that.
So what, sorry, through you, Mayor, what would that mean to, are you asking them to do something different than already there? Because it's already closed, right?
Yes, it is officially closed, but there's just a sign that says it's closed. People continue to walk across the bridge, and staff are of the opinion that the bridge is actually not safe to even walk across the bridge.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no problem.
If I could just ask staff, what are the chances that the bridge is going to fall down this winter if people are walking across it?
Mayor Schatz, unfortunately, that's not a question I can answer. All I can do is report or point back to the enhanced OSIM that was undertaken on the bridge, where the recommendation is that it is not open for any use, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shantz. Sorry, Jared,
Mr. Coupe wanted to say something first.
go ahead.
Sorry, and just for clarity regarding risk management, right now it is an open public road allowance, which requires minimum maintenance standard level on staff. So we would look to reduce that liability risk to an occupier's liability, which would require closing the open portion of the road across the bridge. And then we would look to barricade to prevent people from traversing the bridge itself. But that is certainly at the behest of our insurance provider and risk managers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you to Councillor Merlehan. Are you talking about the $84,000 that they want to spend on stopping up the end of the bridge at each end, as well as part of this motion?
I thought the 84,000 was to go towards the rest of the EA process that they were asking for. So I guess it depends on where we go. There's been, to my knowledge, I guess there's been 3 councillors that have talked about replacing the bridge. I don't feel that way, but I don't know how other people feel. If we actually just rehab the bridge to a pedestrian level, then we wouldn't need that EA. So that 84,000 then would not be needed. But that depends on how the decision goes, whether council wants to replace the bridge or continue or just do a rehab. So that's a decision that, you know, either if we defer it, maybe we defer it for a year or something, and then not have that part of this year's budget. It stops the clock on the EA process as well. So once the EA is finalized, the clock is ticking for us to then have to do something. So if we don't make that decision, the clock doesn't start, is my understanding.
If I could follow up on that, Madam Mayor, maybe to either Ryan or Jared. So when you're talking about barricading, are you not talking about turnarounds and everything at that point, or what are you actually talking about?
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Shantz. The intent is to stop people from accessing the bridge because it is deemed to be unsafe. So we don't want to see someone out there walking with their kids one day and the bridge falls in. We just don't want to see that. So we did get an insurance provider opinion, and we need to prevent people from accessing the structure. That will reduce the township's liability.
So that doesn't mean...
Sorry, that does not include the installation of turnarounds at this point, no.
Thank you.
Okay. There's Councillor Martin, do your hand up?
Yes, I did. I was just wondering if I have the opportunity to say a few things about what is said about me and how my name is thrown around for clarification. I will. I'm not going to get in any real big debate. I don't put myself down that low. But what I have said about Mennonites and taxation, listen closely, Pat, you've got it all wrong. They have never complained about paying taxes. What I did say is that they pay a lot of taxes for amenities that they don't use. We subsidize recreation to the tune of $2.8 million a year, trails by over $100,000, all of which they get no benefit by. And I said that it is our place to give them something that they have asked for and they really need. And I said I have no problem paying towards something that they need, because certainly they pay a lot of money towards something they don't use. Does that make sense to you? You got it straight?
Okay. We'll end this here. If you guys need to discuss a little more offline, I'll encourage you to do that. There's a motion to defer. Councillor McMillan and Mr. Coupe, did you want to jump in before Scott? Or?
Scott can go if he wants to. I just wanted
Okay.
to the deferral is going to occur. I just need some clarification.
Yep. Go ahead.
It's real quick. I got a bunch of comments, but if we defer, it can wait until then. I just wanted to say the reason why I'm for deferral is I was talking to you, Mayor Shantz, a while ago about an issue with the region, and you said something that was really astute to me. You said you didn't mind if we made the expenditure, but you wanted it to be intentional. And I feel like if we don't understand how this fits into our larger budget, we're not being intentional. And I'm not against spending the money to repair the bridge or I'm not against spending money on anything. I'm for spending money. We're here to serve our constituents and we should spend money, and I'm for it. But we need to be intentional about it and how it fits in the budget, how we're going to pay for it, all of that stuff. We have to understand how that fits together. So that's why I would vote to defer. I agree with a lot about what Councilor Merlehan said, but just being intentional with how we spend that money. So that's why I'm for the deferral.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the deferral? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And I think we said deferral to February 9th, Mr. Coupe, if that's reasonable for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Shantz. I don't have an issue with the deferral date. I just wanted some point of clarity for staff's benefit. I think we've had 3 pretty decent meetings, I will say, on this topic. This is a challenging one. We know this. I think if I would just like to get some direction in coming forward to make it the most productive on that date, because I feel like we have been sort of, providing different recommendations, and I'm going to suggest something and see if council's okay with this. From a staff perspective, we feel that there are 3 viable options for council's consideration. One would be the first recommendation that we brought forward, which would more align with Ms. Hodgson's request to defer for funding. That would be to close the bridge and to hope for some upper government funding, and that gave us a 10-year time window to deal with that. So that would really fly nicely with what Ms. Hodgson was proposing. So that's a consideration for council. The second option that we would see as viable is the rehabilitation of the existing structure for pedestrian use only. I think I would echo council's concern. We've seen that with all of our other structures. There is complete disregard for these load limits. There are a small percentage of people that respect and value very much the heritage aspect of these beautiful structures. But the reality is different. The reality is people just take their Ford F-150s or 250s and cross them, and they just wear out. These are over 100 years old, and things do wear out. So we see that a rehabilitation of this structure preserves its heritage value, allows people to enjoy those picturesque views from the bridge structure, and keeps it much longer without having the vehicle impacts. And then, of course, the third option is what was in the report tonight, was certainly to remove, replace, continue on with the Schedule C, which would explore replacement options and to look to commemorate the heritage value of the structure. So if council's okay with that, I think it would be, we could certainly revise the report to identify those 3 options and have discussions on those options. And certainly we're prepared to discuss any one of those, but that may help council, narrow the focus. And we have struggled, obviously, with these EAs, and why we're here with an EA is because they are an endless cycle of money. And we were fortunate to get money for Glasgow. Unfortunately, we're not in that same boat here with Peel, and council's well aware that we made a decision to close and ultimately remove the Middlebrook structure. So with that, I would just look at if there's support for us to get that direction.
I think that summarizes the discussion. Is anyone on council opposed to staff sort of focusing in on those 3 options? Okay, Councilor Ryan?
I'm good with either option 1 or 2. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, Councilor Shantz. What?
I have a question.
Oh, okay. There
Just,
you are.
just asking for February 9th, if we get delegation requests, am I to open the agenda to delegation requests? We've already had several opportunities for that. Just want some council direction.
No.
We have to. We have to.
I think we need, Councillor Shantz, did you want to speak to the delegation question?
Well, I think that gives a couple of months for the community to start pounding the pavement and coming back with some information. So it probably would be good to have the delegations, and hopefully they would come back with some reports of some sort as to whether they're being successful or not being successful, and that maybe helps a little bit. I just want to say that I'm feeling for staff here. I mean, it's been on and off a number of times, and Ryan's been patient with all the emails going back and forth. So I just want to say publicly that they're doing a good job, and no slight against staff. I think this is a big commitment either way, and I agree that we have to do it wisely and move cautiously. So, but kudos to staff for putting up with us.
Thank you. Well said, Larry, and I echo Larry's comments that, you know, obviously council is struggling with this as much as anyone is. So thank you for your patience with us.
Just one final thing, if we are allowing delegations for February 9th for 5 minutes, since this has already been through, or 10. 10 as usual, but because this has already been through the process, I would recommend 5.
Council, what's your pleasure? 5, I see 5, I see 5.
I would say 10. I mean, if we end up tearing down the bridge and people feel like we shortchanged them on time, I think that would be less than ideal.
We'll say 10, and hopefully they're coming with new information and that they report.
7.5.
Councilor Burton.
One quick question.
Yep.
So we've deferred this to February the 9th. What do we expect on February the 9th?
I'm thinking that staff is going to come with a little more information on the 3 options that they just outlined, and we will have the discussion that we had similar to today, I guess. Mr. Coupe, can you, or
Yeah.
Larry?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Martin, I guess that's what I was looking for, is that we would go away and revise the report, outlining very clearly those 3 options we just discussed and those implications. At this point, you know, all of them, except I guess option 1, would require debenture, right? That's a fact that we've discussed here too. And I guess the benefit for council is you will have gone through at least the budget deliberations, certainly from infrastructure service. Oh, I guess we would have gone through all of the department's budgets by the time we get to February 9th. So you would have had a good look at what the future year is and the forecasted year. So I think that's what I heard council wanting to do.
Councilor Shantz, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I think the benefit is that we will be through the budget process and we'll know kind of what things are going to look like. So that's probably a wise move.
Okay. Are we all set on this topic then? I think we've beat it to pieces tonight. And we'll revisit it after we've had a chance to peruse the budget and work our way through that. So thank you again to staff. We have a number of items on the consent agenda. Would someone like to move them? Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion that council convenes into committee of the whole, moved by Councillor Reddekopp, seconded by Councillor Mohan. All those in favor? It's carried. We have a number of staff reports that hopefully are fairly straightforward. The first one is annual grants application. Mr. Smith, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for council's benefit, you'll probably be aware that your grants budget usually includes both some grants that have been pre-approved in past years, as well as council usually entertains new grant applications. This year, we did open the annual grant application process from October 26th to November 20th. But I'm here to report, or just to update council, that we have received no new grant applications that would be for you to consider in your grants budget. We would typically have any new organizations or grant applicants present to council either in November or December. So if you're wondering why those haven't come forward yet, it's because we haven't had any new ones. I will just advise council that there was one delegate who previously presented to council representing the Three Sisters Cultural Center. They ultimately decided to submit a grant in kind application. That is treated differently under the grants policy since there's no application deadline and it does not affect your grants budget. So if there are no questions, or if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, you will see there's no recommendation in this memo. You will see a full report come forward with grants, pre-approved grants in your budget package.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Smith? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much. Next, traffic and parking bylaw update. Randy Miller, Development Engineering Supervisor. Mr. Miller. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Johnson, members of council. Hopefully I'm speaking loud enough for you. I would like to present report DS 39 2020 traffic and parking bylaw updates for 2020. We've had a number of developments occur over the past couple of years, and now that they've registered, it's time, and the roads are now public roadways. We are looking to update this bylaw to recognize the traffic control signage that's in those developments. Now, another thing that's come to light recently is in one of our subdivisions in Breslau, we had some construction activity where heavy trucks were utilizing local residential roads that weren't part of a designated construction route. And we, as township staff, we interacted with the developer, and there was lots of effort to try and get some of these subcontractors to stop utilizing these roads, but human nature is take the easy road. So they didn't follow the designated haul routes. So through some research and talking with Township bylaw and Waterloo Regional Police, basically it boils down to we have to enact no truck prohibitions on a few of these local streets to allow for Waterloo Regional Police and bylaw to issue fines. And that is something that won't be, I would say, long-term. It's going to be probably for the next, I'm going to guess, 5 years. And the reason that has to be in place in these particular streets in Breslau and the Empire subdivision is because future phases are right up against where these streets are going to be extended. And my fear is we're going to see this construction traffic utilize it as a shortcut. So basically the report is just to amend our bylaw and recognize traffic requirements in the new subdivisions, but also put in place this truck prohibition. Signage for this truck prohibition has been installed by the developer at their expense. There was no dispute or issue with the developer. They were willing to do this. And we're just looking for this bylaw to be passed so that we can move on.
Okay. Are there questions? Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, through you to Mr. Miller. I was surprised to see that Andover is a truck or a construction route. I know years ago they had a route that they come off of Woolwich south of the Mennonite church there, And wondering, is that not open anymore, and can they not use that to keep it off Andover? I guess my concern is that there's a new school going in there, and with truck traffic going down through there, is that a safety issue?
Okay, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz. Yes, there is a designated construction route, and it does come off of Woolwich Street onto what we refer to as the future Ottawa road allowance or corridor. And that was used during the construction of we call it phase 1, which occurred in 2018. And what has happened with that construction route is the school was built. So that was basically cut that construction access off. Now that they're in, Empire is into phase 2, we've worked with them to come up with a new construction access. And basically right now until the end of June 2021, they are going to use the future Ottawa road allowance, and they come onto Starlight Avenue at the west end. And then right where the school is, they get back onto what was their original construction route. The emphasis on them is to have all of their underground servicing for phase 2, including curb and gutter and asphalt, completed by, in their timeline, is by the end of May. And we've given them until the end of June to make all restorations and repairs on Starlight Avenue so that when the school is opened in the fall, there is no construction activity at all in that area. And Empire has been made aware or told that they will have to find alternate methods for their construction traffic to get around the community. Andover is a construction access for their what they call low rise. There has to be a way for their house builders to get into build the houses, obviously. Our concern is more to do with the heavy construction equipment that's required to install the sewers and the roads. That's the type of traffic that really beats up a road surface. So we're trying to avoid that. When phase 3 happens, which is to the west, towards the river from the school, and to the south, which is behind the school, to the future Ottawa road allowance, the Ottawa corridor is definitely going to be their access point. So we just want to make sure that the truck prohibition's in place so that we don't see any of this activity coming off of Andover. And that's basically the requirement for the truck prohibition there.
Thank you.
Councilor Rohan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Mr. Miller. First off, I think this is only maybe the second time you've addressed council since I've been on council, so welcome back. As far as the report goes, I'm wondering for the next phases of development, is there any option that you could put in the subdivision agreements that the truck traffic, like perhaps there's penalties on the developer if they don't enforce their construction traffic? Is that something that is able to do as the township able to enforce that? The one thing I think about is, yes, you can do tickets and everything now for the police, but you actually need police there to catch them in the act. And I don't know how eager the police department would be in enforcing that. Do you have any comments on that aspect?
Yes, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Merlehan. I actually met with the police out there on site, and there was a willingness to, if this was a big problem and the signs were in place, they indicated that they would come out and do a bit of a blitz if it was going to continue as a big problem. As far as subdivision agreements, we do have wording in there that speaks to designated construction routes. We don't have the ability to find behind the developer. It's a cooperation component. For the most part, in my time with the township, we've had, there's been a few issues, but they get resolved quickly. This developer does want to work with it and work with the township and try and minimize the impact. So I think in this case, we kind of, with the school construction occurring and blocking off what was their original construction access, has kind of brought that traffic issue to light. So yeah, we can look at trying to strengthen our wording a little more, but I don't think we have the ability legally to impose some form of a fine on the developers. And it's really a cooperation basis. And like I said, Empire has been cooperative. It's not that they haven't relayed the message to their trades. And I believe the one trade that was pretty much the culprit has been, like, we don't have that issue right now. They've been basically pulled off the job. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Miller. Good to see you.
Thank you. Back in the trenches.
Yeah, okay. That's awesome. Next is a site alteration bylaw, and I will call on Director of Development Services, Mark Pomponi. Welcome, Mr. Pomponi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hopefully the report I have will be self-explanatory, but I wanted to touch on a few things. The proposed bylaw is intended to really regulate site alteration, and site alteration can be removal of soil or materials, importation, or changing of site characteristics such as grading. It's a fairly common practice that's been formalized by the province. Most municipalities do have some sort of site alteration bylaw in place. Certainly Waterloo, Brantford, Kitchener, Hamilton, Markham, Georgina, they're fairly common. Way back when this process was being created, I'm going to say around 2015, 2014, I attended a lot of the working sessions with the province when they were looking at creating legislation. And certainly that process identified a number of issues that could be that were flagged as potential problems that municipalities had been facing. One of the big problems they had is that when they were dealing with these site alterations, there was a patchwork of regulations and a scattering of legislation that was very uncoordinated and lacked sort of an integration with each other. Municipalities quickly passed fill bylaws when they started receiving these large amounts of fill that were coming in from the GTA areas and being dumped on properties. There was no sort of oversight or regulation for it. There's a number of high-profile cases that certainly made it into the news. There was one in Hamilton. There's a couple where a farmer, I think I cited them in the report, where one farmer had somebody show up, brought in fill. Turns out it was very contaminated to the point where this farm, this small little property, could no longer be sold. It had no value. In another case, they looked for loopholes in legislation to try to avoid municipal oversight. And there's a case north of Lindsay where they brought in these small companies, bought a farm, filled it many meters in height, and called it an aerodrome, and therefore was subject to federal regulations, and said the municipality had no jurisdiction. It turns out it didn't, but they had to go to court to fight it. Certainly when we had our education sessions, we were shown this one video which was really very interesting, and it showed a backhoe excavator digging up some soil, and as they were doing it, the soil was on fire, which tells you that there's some sort of contamination in there. These are some of the worst case scenarios that you get. Currently, we've seen some instances in Woolwich where we've had filling coming in. We've struggled with a lack of bylaw that would prevent or regulate this, or give clear direction on the process of how to deal with these site alterations. And so this bylaw before you tonight will create that clarity and create that process. And hopefully it will give some certainty as how to process them and at least a regulation and applications and agreements and things like that that we could use. And so the other part of this, which is probably a much less significant part of it, is really to deal with the building permit review. I mean, we're doing a big portion of this right now through new plans of subdivision. We review them anyways. The issues come up when people want to try to start to change them and start to make alterations to the property. It's a pretty cumbersome process. You start to open up lot and block agreements that are registered on title for new subdivisions. In some cases, they don't exist. So what we're hoping is that this is going to be a permissive process, and we certainly internally see it as a permissive process. That if people want to alter their site, if they're putting in swimming pools and things like that, we can create a process to get them to that rather than opening up a subdivision agreement, getting lawyers involved and things like that. But at least we can get some sort of an easier process we're hoping for. We've had some cases where people have done that, and it's again, there's not a real clear process or bylaw to do with that. It's also looking at in areas where there aren't any sort of agreements registered on title, like we're dealing with severances or other properties. We expect for some of these smaller things, and I think I said it in the report, but I'd like to highlight again, a lot of these permits, if it's like a swimming pool, it might be somebody coming to the counter, they pull out somebody to look at it, and it's a quick sign off. When we've dealt with this before in my previous positions, they're really quick sign-offs in the majority of the cases. There are, however, those cases where there could be potential problems with rock grading and drainage that could affect multiple properties, and that's what we're hoping to avoid, is to deal with this up front rather than after the fact and trying to fix things after the fact. With that, I would certainly ask for any questions if anybody has any.
Questions, Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Through you to Mark. Had we had this in place, would have we avoided the issues we had in Grandview Drive?
Yes. Quite simply. I mean, the Grandview Drive was brought in, and you heard them say they did not violate any bylaws, and they're true. They didn't at that time. If we had this in, and I believe they cited that because they knew we did not have site alteration. What happens is that municipalities get a reputation for not having site alteration, and people kind of move to them and say, "You don't have site alteration, let's go to this municipality and start to dump fill." This was a case where we didn't have that. The other thing that I've seen is the province doing highway works, where they've gone in and started to do highway works and do grading and things like that to accommodate the work that's being done. And they start to sell off or to get rid of the soil at abutting properties. And in a case like that, what we did is we sent out our field services technician, and they shut it down and they stopped. And so yeah, Grandview Circle for sure.
Any other questions? Councillor Rowan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Mr. Proponi. I have a couple of questions. My first one would be, is the intent of this bylaw to reduce the amount of soil and site alteration in the township? And do you think it will do that? And I say that prefacing looking deeper into the policies. There's a $2,500 fee for the application. The site plans have to be signed off by an engineer, which can cost upwards of $500 to get a signature on that. In some cases, you're asking for 3 or 4 different sets of insurance that the township has to be named on. You could ask for anywhere up to 5 or 6 studies, noise studies, traffic studies, all that kind of stuff. Like this could get really expensive. And, you know, when I just was reading into the fine details there, I was thinking, who would ever even want to do this? So, and I understand from what you just said about, you know, having this in place to avoid things like Grandview. But I'm just wondering, is this go too far, or is there a lot of what do you call flexibility, I guess, from what is asked of? Because there are a lot of things that that could potentially add up to significant dollars before you even drop a load of soil.
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor. It's not a prohibitive document. It's not meant to prohibit. It may discourage some people. What the real intent here, and I would say that the bylaw that we've written here is typical. I mean, it's in fact I copied it from another municipality. So, if you look at the potential cost, it could be a lot of money. Certainly, I dealt with a company that was looking at this and was a kind of we follow around and figured it out.
Is it possible for you to get a little closer to your mic?
Sure. Sorry. Okay. I'll try to do it. Hopefully, yeah. So I'd say it's not a prohibitive document. Certainly, there could be costs, but in some cases, people are not really worried about them. You have to also kind of remember that a receiving site is getting paid to receive that soil. So it's a potential source of income for some people. So you could have potentially a farm, as an example, may actually be able to bring in some soil onto a property. What we need to make sure there's a couple things.
Sean, I can't actually hear Mark.
I can hear you, Mark.
We're having trouble hearing.
Let's put in the budget a new microphone for Mr. Pomponi.
Sorry, I am talking louder, but I'll try again. Is this better?
A little bit.
Close to the.
Yeah, okay, I'll just talk louder. So you have to remember that the sites that are receiving the soil are getting a fee to receive it. And it can be a significant amount of money. So they would have to weigh out the cost of doing some of these studies. Not all of these studies would necessarily be required, but when you are looking at things like haul routes, that's an important study to have, what the haul routes are going to be, because what has happened in many municipalities is that you get 100 or 1,000 truckloads going down a road that's not built for it, and it's busting up the road. So I'd say there might be costs there. There's flexibility, and certainly if you look at the bylaw, it talks about the ability of the director to make the call on what studies would be required. You're not necessarily going to get all of them, but there's a wide range of them that you could get and you should get to protect the infrastructure, to make sure that there isn't contamination being brought on site, and that things like environmental features are not being harmed or damaged. So.
Okay, thanks. And just one follow-up question. My other concern with some of the fees on the smaller jobs. So there's an application fee of site alteration less than 500 cubic meters. It's a $150 charge. And I'm thinking, hey, if my wife wants me to put some raised beds in my backyard, and I go and get a whole bunch of loads of dirt and stuff, and do that on a weekend, am I subject to that $150 fee? And do I have to go to the township with a plan and show them what I'm going to do before I go pick up dirt? Is that part of the intent, or can we limit, and have, if something is under 100 cubic meters, I don't even know what that translates to in truckloads, but a certain limit where it's like, yeah, you can go do your flower beds and things without having to get permitted on that.
Yeah, for you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. I mean, the intent is to keep the small things out of it, right? And I believe there's a 20 cubic meter minimum. If you're below 20 cubic meters, you're exempt. If you check, I forget the section of the bylaw, but towards the end of the exemption, it lists things like swimming pools that are exempt. There is a caveat there that says, provided they do not alter the drainage. So in most cases, my experience has been is that the smaller projects like pools and sheds and things like that, they get a quick look at the counter. There's no fee, there's no application. It's relatively quick. And it's done at the counter when they come in. What we are really hoping to deal with is that if we get one of those quick ones at the counter, let's say, and we get a review of it, and the engineer looks at it and says, you have the potential of altering a swale, which could back up water, storm drainage onto your neighbor's property, or 2 or 3 or 4 neighbors' property down the line. You need to give us some additional information. We make a determination on what sort of stuff we would need, survey information, maybe it's a lot grading drainage plan. It might be just some clarification of survey work out there that needs to be done to confirm grade. But it may not, even in that case there, depending on the extent of it, it may not even require a permit. It just really needs some additional information. I think I said in the report, we don't want to make it conditional. We don't want to make it.
Losing you again.
We want to make it. Sorry, I am. Believe it or not. We are attempting to make it not cumbersome, not expensive, but we need to make sure that we are protecting other properties and drainage systems beyond this property. So.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shant, second by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Next is Economic Development and Tourism Officer Jen Morris to talk about the municipal accommodation tax funding. Welcome, Ms. Morris. You're muted yet. There we go.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you. And good evening, all, Mayor Shantz and Council. I will try and keep this short as per your request, and it is getting late. So tonight's report, DS 42 2020, is for a program that will directly support one of our most impacted sectors through the COVID-19 pandemic. To help relieve the negative financial impact COVID-19 has had on the industry, FedDev Ontario awarded funding through the Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Program. This program is designed to support small and medium-sized businesses and not-for-profits in the tourism sector by supporting one-time adaptation and reopening costs through grants incurred to continue operating beyond COVID-19. Explore Waterloo Region has been allocated as a partner for this regional project, $240,000 for the program to disperse across the region. So this isn't nearly enough for all of the tourism businesses across the region, and the cities and townships are pitching in to help the businesses in their respective municipalities. So to directly support businesses in the township of Woolwich, we recommend contributing the $20,000 from our Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Program from our Transient Accommodation Reserve Fund. The Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Grant Program requires the funds to be dispersed by the end of February, and Explore Waterloo Region is ready to roll the funds out as soon as they receive their final agreement from FedDev. So this will roll out really quickly, and the funds can be, the request can be for funds that had incurred all the way back to March 2020. The Transient Accommodation Reserve Fund, or the Municipal Accommodation Tax, MAT, started in 2019, and the full balance is available for projects just like this one that support the tourism industry. So I promised I'd keep it really short and sweet. With that, I will say thank you, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Looks like the report was perfect. There's no questions. Would someone like to? Councillor McMillan, Councillor Moynihan, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Morrison. Thanks for supporting our businesses. It's been a rough go for them, and I know you sort of started right at the beginning of the pandemic and had trial by fire, and have done a really good job of supporting them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sean. Thanks, Council. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks. Mr. Coupé, you have a tender award for us.
Thank you, Mayor Sean. Through you to members of council, what we have before you is a tender award being offered to Parkway Ford at a total cost of $86,118.47 for the purchase of 2 vehicles. That would be a Ford F-150 4x4 pickup truck and a Ford F-350 cab and chassis. I was alerted to an issue with the report. I want to clarify. We are not looking for a 3500. That would be in the GM variety. We were looking for a 1-ton. So there is some confusion there. But later on, I just want to be clear that it is certainly a Ford F-150 and a Ford 350. I apologize to Parkway Ford for that. One thing I would want to point out to council, it is a bit of an awkward year, obviously, with COVID and the pandemic. What we were involved in doing this past summer is renting 2 pickup trucks. So you will notice in the report, we have a deficit to the tune of about $18,000. And that is just simply to outfit the F-350 with the toolboxes to make it a service truck. We will have sufficient dollars available when all the vehicles go to auction. However, we are going to retain vehicles so that we do not have to go through the rental process this summer. And of course, we would certainly release those vehicles back to auction once the restrictions of the pandemic have been lifted. So this is to maintain our physical distance. We are very fortunate at the township to be able to have enough vehicles, even with some summer student onboarding that we are still planning to do. And we can discuss that more at the budget deliberations in January. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Questions? Councilor, excuse me, Councilor McMillan.
Yeah, just one quick one. Mr. Poupe talked earlier about F-350s driving across closed bridges, and now he's asking us to buy him one. So I want to make sure he doesn't have anything crazy planned for it.
No, we do not. We do certainly respect our load limited structures. Thank you.
Okay. I want to know who caught the GM Ford thing. Okay, someone like to move the recommendation. Councillor Redekop and Councillor Martin, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And Mr. Poupe, drinking water management standard, 2019 annual report. We're getting there.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, and through you to members of council. So we once again have made the absolute last council meeting for which to be compliant with our DWQMS reporting. I do want to apologize for that, but it is an indication that we have struggled greatly in this aspect. We are compliant. That's the important part. And what I need to highlight to council, as you are the owner of the drinking water system, that's an important piece to note. And we are required to report on our drinking water quality management standard. We always do report for the previous year. However, it is our intent, and I think I have said this, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we do plan on coming at least by mid next year to have our 2020 report done, so that we will not be in December reporting. That is a challenge. So all in all, this is really to highlight to council where we've been at through the course of the year through our management review. You are top management, obviously, as owners. And a couple of points to note, we do continue at a staff level with this. We have fulfilled a very important piece of this reporting through the hiring of a water wastewater supervisor. This person's a longtime employee, so we wouldn't expect the turnover that we have been seeing. That is a good news side of things there. We have struggled, though, at the admin and technical position. We are currently looking to hire for that position as it is vacant right now. And again, another integral part of the reporting. The reporting is very labor intensive and very clerical in nature. Obviously, there's lots of field work that goes into it, but it is all about tracking. and being compliant with the legislation. So this year, we did get kudos, and I think that's important to note, in our external audit by NSF. We did receive some praise in that there was a noted improvement onto our past process. So that is good news, but it certainly doesn't take us off the hook. And we still did get some incidents of non-conformance, albeit minor in nature. Through our SMT discussions, they do look a little more severe. So I did dive into what those incidences of non-conformance in the minor nature are. For council's benefit, I think it's important because when you read them at face value, they look very dire. They really do boil down to some resourcing concerns. For example, the first one, document control processes are not fully effective, is really simply an obsolete version of the management review. And in this case, that's Appendix A. You will see that that is revision 7. I think last year we had reported revision 5 and it should have been 6. So there is a clerical error on our end. The risk assessment process not effectively implemented. Procedure was submitted to council, no evidence that the assumptions used in our risk assessment were reviewed in 2019. So again, we couldn't demonstrate that we had reviewed that risk management assessment last year during our external audit. Processes to identify and ensure quality of all supplies affecting drinking water quality are not fully effective. So we updated our standard operating procedure to reflect those essential services and supplies. So again, another clerical piece. And then the verification of processes. We had in our care and control some outdated chlorometers. My apologies, it is getting late. So we had those in our possession, and certainly that was an oversight on our end too. It's important to note that all of these incidences were corrected March 30th, and the external audit had occurred at the end of January. So they are corrected relatively quickly. We did get some kudos from NSF for improvements, but there is much more to do. And there were 10 incidences of adverse drinking water, all related to total coliforms. This is, I think it's fair to say that we have obviously known locations in our system, but we also do have external bodies doing our sampling. And at times there are sampler errors. For example, we have lots of times where we may get an adverse for a total coliform. However, our total chlorine residuals are very high. So that would indicate to us, and that's generally how things are, that there really isn't a total coliform. It was certainly a sampler error. We flush, we're fine. So we've not had to do a boil water. That would indicate certainly something more serious and significant in the system. That's not the case. It's always resolved due to flushing. And in 2019, that was the case as well. No boil waters, all related to flushing. So it is a mandate of the DWQMS that council is alerted to the system and how it's functioning and how staff are managing it. And as the owners, it was our duty and right to tell you. So here we are, and told you the good with the bad. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Council, questions? Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to Jared. With the new water main going across the river into the golf course, do we have adequate pressure now on our fire hydrants?
I don't know it definitively. I know that it was in the region's care and control for expanding the integrated urban system. They had confirmed that they had adequate fire flow as required. But I think that Conestoga in general has noticed a drop from the Plains well house when that happened. I think there was a slight decrease in pressures, but I would say that it still does meet the requirements of fire flow.
Okay, and my second question, I've heard for some time already, and I think you mentioned in your report, that in the future we're going to see a water main from Waterloo along Northfield hooking up into Conestoga. Is that happening in the next couple of years, or is that way out?
So through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Martin, I apologize. The Shifley Bridge is actually being looked at now. It's going through an environmental assessment process, and Shifley Bridge is the bridge that crosses the Conestoga on Northfield Drive. As part of that exercise, we've made that known that they are to hang that water main. So don't have the crystal ball, but I would say 10 years, within 10 years, hopefully sooner. Certainly in all of our lifetimes, I would say that we will see that. We did have a good meeting with the region regarding redundant water main feeds into the township. And that was a high one, a high priority, along with the one from St. Jacobs to Elmira.
Any other questions? Did you have a follow-up, Mary?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Any other questions? Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor McMillan, Councillor Shantz, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Coupe. Okay, other business. Mayor's report on regional matters. I think the only thing I can tell you is we're going to have a budget day tomorrow. So starting at 2 o'clock, we'll be doing some budget deliberations, and we'll have public input between 6 and 7 tomorrow. Any other council reports? No? Okay. Outstanding activity list. Nothing. All right. Motion that the following bylaws be introduced and read the first and the second time. We have a bylaw to amend the traffic and parking, a bylaw to prohibit or regulate site alterations, basically the bylaws that we went through tonight. Also the bylaw of the Township of Woolwich on temporary use patios, a bylaw establish and maintain reserves, a bylaw to provide the appointment of municipal law enforcement officers for the Township of Woolwich, a bylaw to control actions and proceedings of the council. December 15th. Councilor McMillan, a question? The puzzle?
Yeah, Mayor Shantz, I don't know if this is an appropriate time for this question, but with regards to the reserve, we had talked in one of our budget discussions a few months ago about the possibility of having a COVID relief contingency fund, and I wondered if that is something that we need to include in this, or if that's off the table.
Mr. Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we talked about it when we went through the 2019 surplus deficit discussions, and what we did was we put aside $50,000 into the special contingency reserve, and then if it wasn't touched at the end of this year, then it would go back into the capital.
So if we do the contingency relief reserve in January, and then it gets to be November, December, we'll have to do this kind of same thing for the COVID contingency.
Yes, if we wanted to create a new
Okay.
one, we'd do the same. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Would someone like to move that the bylaws be introduced and read a first and second time? Councillor Reddecock, Councillor McMillan, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Motion that the committee of the whole rise and report to council. Excuse me, Councillor Shantz, Councillor Merlan, all those in favor? Carried. Yeah. Motion that council confirms and adopts the proceedings of the committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Reddecock. All those in favor? It's carried. We have 4 pieces of communication. Does anyone want to talk about any of those? No? There's a public notice. This is notice of intent to discuss the budget. The Council of the Township of Woolwich gives public notice of its intent to discuss the 2021 draft operating and capital budgets at 4 special council budget meetings on January 5th, January 7th, January 12th, and January 14th, 2021, each commencing at 6 p.m. in the council chambers. It'll be by Zoom, I imagine. Situated at 24 Church Street West in Elmira and live streamed to the Township of Woolwich YouTube channel. I need a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 85-2020 to 92-2020, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And that is the end of business for tonight. I want to say, yeah, don't go away yet. Thank you to staff and thank you to council for a good year. This is our last meeting of 2020, and we will hope that 2021 has a little less drama. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and to everyone out there. And again, thank you. I would make a motion that I would ask, sorry? Larry wants to talk. Okay, Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess maybe you should have brought this up earlier, but when are the budget reports going to be available?
Mr. Patrick, I think that was going to be before Christmas, isn't it?
Yes. So we're aiming for Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. We're hoping they will be sometime Tuesday after late afternoon or early Wednesday morning.
And that's going to be in print?
I will work with Alex on that for you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Motion to adjourn? Councillor Martin, Councillor Shantz, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you again to all of you and to everyone who tuned into the meeting, YouTube live stream. Council members, just stay connected until the live stream has stopped. And good night to everyone. We'll wait for Mr. Girth to give us the signal here.